In this video, I modify equipment for use outside its intended region. This should not be treated as a tutorial, and I do not recommend that you copy my actions. This is spare time repair, and the return of my blue mat means that my belongings have finally arrived from the UK. I moved from the UK to the USA about 3 months ago, and among the things I chose to ship over were a number of electronic items. To be honest, I didn't know for sure whether they would work over here, but I thought it was worth the gamble, and today we're going to find out whether that was a wise decision or if I should have left them behind and started again. The items I'm chiefly concerned about are my HiFi components, and those were all purchased in the UK, where the supply is nominally 230 volts at 50 Hz, although it's usually closer to 240 volts. Across the Atlantic here, the AC voltage is about half that number, around 115 volts. The voltage here is actually a little higher, it's 123, and the frequency is also different at 60 Hz. A lot of small electronics items like chargers or hair straighteners are designed to accept a wide voltage range because they're things you're likely to take on holiday. We can see, for example, on this AC adapter, the input range is anything from 100 to 240 volts, and it will accept 50 to 60 Hz. But what happens when you have an item that isn't designed to be casually thrown in a suitcase? Well, we're going to start with this minidisc recorder that I purchased secondhand a few years back. Minidisc wasn't as popular here in North America, so you're not likely to find one of these in a thrift store, so I'm very hopeful that this will work. And for the purposes of testing, I'm going to be using a travel adapter. But of course, if it does work, I'll be replacing the whole cord with a US one. It's also worth mentioning at this point that polarity could be an issue with these items. A UK plug can only be inserted one way, but a non-polarized US plug can be inserted two ways. So this is a non-polarized US plug. Both the blades are the same width, and it can obviously be inserted in both directions. This, on the other hand, is a polarized plug where one blade is wider than the other one, and this is the neutral, and the narrower blade is the live. And this can only be inserted in one direction because one of these slots is wider than the other. So if I try and turn it around, it won't actually go in. You do also get grounded plugs here where there's an extra pin, and the polarity then becomes irrelevant because you can only insert it in one direction. If we look at the back of this minidisc recorder, it does suggest an AC input voltage of 220 to 230 volts, which is a little bit ominous, but it does also say it will work on 50 or 60 Hertz. This symbol here means that it doesn't need to be earthed. So I'm going to plug it for now into the travel adapter, and since this is the live side, that means this blade is going to be live, so I'm going to put this into the narrower side of the outlet just in case it is an issue. And then on the back we've got a main power switch, so I'm going to slide that on. Well, we have a green light, absolutely nothing on the display. Now the display was getting dim on this machine, I remember, so it's possible that that's just gone kaput and it will still work. So I'm going to attempt to load a disc. So will it accept it? No. No, it's just ejecting it immediately. And in fact, it's turned itself off because it's now turned red. That green light is now pulsing. And so disappointingly, we clearly have issues with this piece of equipment, but all is not necessarily lost, because inside there may be a switch or a jumper that I can use to convert the transformer. I will take a look at that later. Next up is my Sony cassette deck. You may have seen this in previous videos. And again, it suggests an input voltage of at least 220. So we're plugged in, and we do have a display. So that's encouraging. Let's pop a tape in, see what it does. It appears to be working. doesn't want to rewind. When I press rewind, I get a flashing pause symbol and nothing happens. It's definitely not happy. See, when I press play, the display flashes. And it takes a couple of presses to actually get it to work. Let's plug some headphones in, see what we're getting.
Ja, hier, liebe Frau.
Well, you can hear it appears to be playing, but it's definitely not as responsive as it should be. So again, I can look inside, see if there's a conversion that I can do, but that doesn't look too encouraging either. Next we have my Audio-Technica turntable. It says 220 to 240 volts, 50 to 60 hertz. But this one isn't hard wired. It has a polarized figure of 8 socket, and I do happen to have a suitable US version of that lead. So this is an easy conversion if it does work. So I'll just plug that in the back. I'm going to remove the lid because it's causing glare with the lights. So will we have any life? Yeah. If I use my turntable speed app, we can see that it's playing at the correct speeds, more or less. And so this item appears to be fine. To be honest, I'm slightly disappointed at that because I was looking for an excuse to buy a new turntable. And this is the item I'm most concerned about and least optimistic about. It's my Onkyo A9010 amplifier. Again, as before, it wants 220 volts. So we're plugged in. And we've got absolutely nothing. No relay click, no lights on the front. So I'm going to take the cover off and see if there's any internal switch we can use. Well, we're inside now and there's some stuff of interest on this main power board, so I'm going to zoom in on that. So written here it says AC 100 to 120 volts, and that's been crossed out, and underneath it says 220 to 240. So that suggests that it's the same board for both Europe and North America. But does it mean it's populated with different components, or can I just change a jumper setting? Well, here we have some version numbers for various different voltages. So that suggests that they are different components. Well, I took this board out probably optimistically in the hope that it would tell me something, but it doesn't. I think the only way would be to replace this whole transformer, which is frankly more trouble than it's worth, I think. So this amplifier at least is not going to work here, at least not without a step-down power transformer, but I'll come to that later. We're now looking inside the Sony tape deck since that sort of worked, but again there's no obvious signs of a quick conversion, no switches or jumpers on this power supply, so I don't think I'll be using this machine here either. And finally, for the sake of interest, this is the minidisc deck, and again no obvious signs of conversion. In fact, the transformer is integrated into the main board, so I don't think it's really feasible to change that out. So while that's all very disappointing, there is a solution in the form of this, the step-up, step-down power transformer I mentioned earlier. So with this you select your input voltage, so in this case it's 110, and then it will apparently output 220, which should be plenty for my devices. The thing is, you wouldn't want one of these attached to every single item. So my thought was, if I did want to go down that route, you could cut the plug off a normal power strip, put a UK plug on here. Well, actually, you might not even need to. Would that go in there? Yeah. We could just plug a normal power strip into here and power all those devices using just the one transformer. So I'm going to just check that they do work using this. My main concern is that it might hum. You know, that low transformer hum, that would be a deal breaker for me. Just turn it on. Well, you probably can't hear that, but there is a hum. It's not as bad as I thought it might be. I'll just hold it up to the microphone. That's probably not coming out on the audio, but you can definitely tell that it's turned on. Although, of course, if you were listening to music, you certainly wouldn't hear it then. Of course, if you were using the power strip option, you would have to replace all the cords with US cords in order to plug them in here. Let's try the minidisc recorder first of all. And yeah, this time we have a display, although it's barely readable. That was an issue before. I might look at that. There might be a capacitor going on the board for the display, or it might just need rejuvenating. Let's see if it accepts a disc. Yep, it's accepted the disc and read the table of contents. And you can hear through the headphones that it's working fine. Interestingly, I've just plugged the cassette deck in, and that is now giving me nothing whatsoever. Though perhaps I didn't reconnect the power board properly. It's probably that. Yep, forgot to reconnect the power switch. So let's try it again. And of course we have a display. And now it should work first time. Well, very noisy. I've had problems before with noise with this deck. And finally, the amplifier. I don't see any lights on the front. Did I damage it by plugging it into the wrong voltage initially? Or again, did I fail to reconnect it properly? Yep, that connector wasn't seated properly. So I think it's going to be fine. Yep, now we have a blinking light. And I have all my inputs. So on the front of the step-up transformer, it says it outputs 220 volts. I'm interested just to see how accurate that is. So I'm going to probe this while I've got it open. Well, it's actually 244, which is about what you'd get in the UK. But it is still at 60 Hertz, so I guess it can't change the AC frequency within that unit. So if I want to keep using all these components, it looks like my best option is to use the step-up power transformer with a power strip. And that would involve replacing all these cords with US cords so that I don't have to use a travel adapter on each one. So I can just release this cable grip from here, and then I can just cut it here, feed the new cable in through the strain relief and join them together, probably with a Vargo connector or something like that. So I've used a polarized plug for this, and I've fed it through the old strain relief, and I've coupled the wires together using these Vargo clones. So here the black wire is live, so I've joined that to the brown, and the white is neutral. So now I can just plug this in. And the benefit of doing it this way is that if I ever do move back to the UK, I can easily swap it back again. And I've done exactly the same on the minidisc deck, but I've decided I'm going to leave the tape deck for now, because I do have other options on that front. So let's hook everything up and see how we go. Well, small problem that I should have anticipated. As soon as I plugged this into the step-up transformer, turned this on, it went pop. There was a puff of smoke. Yeah, I think it's because this is surge protected, and obviously it thought there was a massive power surge and just couldn't deal with it. So I found this other power strip and taken it apart, and this has got a varistor in, which is again for surge protection. So I'm going to remove that, and it's also got these USB ports which I'm going to desolder as well, because we're not going to use those. Obviously I'm going to put a big label on here saying 240 volts only, because clearly if you plug anything intended as 110 volts in here, it's gonna go bang. I should have said, of course, that I don't recommend doing any of what I'm doing here. This is just a solution that I've found. It's probably very bad practice. It's certainly bad practice if there's anyone else in the house who might plug things in they shouldn't do. So the sensible thing would be to have a step-up transformer for each individual piece of equipment. I just don't want to do that. So I've snipped those wires. I'm still going to leave it in there just because it looks neater. But now we've got no surge protection, there shouldn't be any issues. Just label that up for the avoidance of any doubt. And perhaps unsurprisingly, this is now dead as well. So I'm hoping it's just a fuse. Yep, that's been properly fried. A couple of days have passed and my spare fuses have arrived. Incidentally, looking at the manual for this transformer, it claims that there are 2 spare fuses in the box, but I've now purchased 2 of these and neither of them have the spare fuses. So hopefully that was the only problem. Yes, so now we can continue with our experiment. Okay, please excuse the mess, I've just temporarily hooked things up, but I've got the transformer with the modified power strip plugged into it, and I have hooked up the amplifier to the speakers and the minidisc deck and turntable too. So hopefully now when we turn this on it should be fine, there should be no pop. So we should now have 240 volts coming out of here. Let's try and turn on the amp. So far so good. We'll try the minidisc first. Everything seems to be working okay. I definitely need to sort out that display though. That's the minidisc working fine. I have no reason to doubt that the turntable will be fine also.
Now mark me how I will undo myself. I give this heavy weight from off my head.
And so once again, I do need to stress that although this solution does work, you do need to be very careful not to accidentally plug anything into this increased power supply. It helps in my case that it's bright blue as a sort of warning and that there are no spare outlets on the strip. But of course, if you choose to do the same, then it's entirely at your own risk. I would eventually like to have all my components native to North America, and as I find cheap alternatives, I may well swap them all out. But for the time being, I'm happy to accept this as a solution. So I hope that was of some interest. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.